In this video of 3 incredible Dorothy Sayers tales, nothing is ever what it seems. First, join a brilliant yet mysterious man who claims to know how to prevent the most terrifying crime, but does he? Then, prepare for a chilling encounter with a haunted policeman, where the line between the living and the dead becomes dangerously thin. Finally, follow the twists and turns of a case so baffling, it will leave you questioning everything. Because, in the teeth of the evidence, things are never as they appear. Secrets are revealed, puzzles are solved, but not without unexpected shocks that'll keep you guessing. Trust me, you won't want to blink for a second, because in these stories, the truth is more twisted than you can imagine. So, are you ready to uncover the hidden mysteries? Let's get started.
The Man Who Knew How by Dorothy Sayers. For perhaps the 20th time since the train had left Carlisle, Pender glanced up from murder at the manse and caught the eye of the man opposite. He frowned a little. It was irritating to be watched so closely, and always with that faint, sardonic smile. It was still more irritating to allow oneself to be so much disturbed by the smile and the scrutiny. Pender wrenched himself back to his book with a determination to concentrate upon the problem of the minister murdered in the library. But the story was of the academic kind that crowds all its exciting incidents into the first chapter and proceeds thereafter by a long series of deductions to a scientific solution in the last. The thin thread of interest, spun precariously upon the wheel of Pender's reasoning brain, had been snapped. Twice he had to turn back to verify points that he had missed in reading. Then he became aware that his eyes had followed 3 closely argued pages without conveying anything whatever to his intelligence. He was not thinking about the murdered minister at all. He was becoming more and more actively conscious of the other man's face. A queer face, Pender thought. There was nothing especially remarkable about the features in themselves. It was their expression that daunted Pender. It was a secret face, the face of one who knew a great deal to other people's disadvantage. The mouth was a little crooked and tightly tucked in at the corners, as though savouring a hidden amusement. The eyes, behind a pair of rimless pince-nez, glittered curiously, but that was possibly due to the light reflected in the glasses. Pender wondered what the man's profession might be. He was dressed in a dark lounge suit, a raincoat and a shabby soft hat. His age was perhaps about 40. Pender coughed unnecessarily and settled back into his corner, raising the detective story high before his face, barrier fashion. This was worse than useless. He gained the impression that the man saw through the maneuver and was secretly entertained by it. He wanted to fidget, but felt obscurely that his doing so would in some way constitute a victory for the other man. In his self-consciousness, he held himself so rigid that attention to his book became a sheer physical impossibility. There was no stop now before Rugby, and it was unlikely that any passenger would enter from the corridor to break up this disagreeable solitude à deux. But something must be done. The silence had lasted so long that any remark, however trivial, would, so Pender felt, burst upon the tense atmosphere with the unnatural clatter of an alarm clock. One could, of course, go out into the corridor and not return, but that would be an acknowledgement of defeat. Pender lowered murder at the manse and caught the man's eye again. "Getting tired of it?" asked the man. "Night journeys are always a bit tedious," replied Pender, half relieved and half reluctant. "Would you like a book?" He took the paperclip clue from his attaché case and held it out hopefully. The other man glanced at the title and shook his head. "Thanks very much," he said, "but I never read detective stories. They're so inadequate, don't you think so?" "They are rather lacking in characterization and human interest, certainly," said Pender. "But on a railway journey—" "I don't mean that," said the other man. "I'm not concerned with humanity, but all these murderers are so incompetent. They bore me." "Oh, I don't know," replied Pender. "At any rate, they are usually a good deal more imaginative and ingenious than murderers in real life." "Than the murderers who are found out in real life, yes," admitted the other man. Even some of those did pretty well before they got pinched, objected Pender. Crippen, for instance. He need never have been caught if he hadn't lost his head and run off to America. George Joseph Smith did away with at least 2 brides quite successfully before fate and the news of the world intervened. Yes, said the other man, but look at the clumsiness of it all. The elaboration, the lies, the paraphernalia. Absolutely unnecessary. Oh, come, said Pender. You can't expect committing a murder and getting away with it to be as simple as shelling peas. Ah, said the other man. You think that, do you? Pender waited for him to elaborate this remark, but nothing came of it. The man leaned back and smiled in his secret way at the roof of the carriage. He appeared to think the conversation not worth going on with. Pender, taking up his book again, found himself attracted by his companion's hands. They were white and surprisingly long in the fingers. He watched them gently tapping upon their owner's knee, then resolutely turned a page, then put the book down once more and said, "Well, if it's so easy, how would you set about committing a murder?" "I?" repeated the man. The light on his glasses made his eyes quite blank to Pender, but his voice sounded gently amused. "That's different. I should not have to think twice about it." "Why not?" "Because I happen to know how to do it." "Do you indeed?" muttered Pender rebelliously. "Oh yes, there's nothing in it." "How can you be sure? You haven't tried, I suppose?" "It isn't a case of trying," said the man. "There's nothing tentative about my method. That's just the beauty of it." "It's easy to say that," retorted Pender, "but what is this wonderful method?" "You can't expect me to tell you that, can you?" said the other man, bringing his eyes back to rest on Pender's. "It might not be safe. You look harmless enough, but who could look more harmless than Crippen? Nobody is fit to be trusted with absolute control over other people's lives." "Bosh!" exclaimed Pender. "I shouldn't think of murdering anybody." "Oh, yes, you would," said the other man, "if you really believed it was safe. So would anybody. Why are all these tremendous artificial barriers built up around murder by the church and the law? Just because it's everybody's crime and just as natural as breathing." "But that's ridiculous," cried Pender warmly. "You think so, do you? That's what most people would say, but I wouldn't trust 'em. Not with sulfate of thanatol to be bought for 2p at any chemist's." "Sulfate of what?" asked Pender sharply. "Ah, you think I'm giving something away? Well, it's a mixture of that and 1 or 2 other things, all equally ordinary and cheap. For 9p you could make up enough to poison the entire cabinet, and even you would hardly call that a crime, would you? But of course one wouldn't polish the whole lot off at once. It might look funny if they all died simultaneously in their baths." "Why in their baths?" "That's the way it would take them. It's the action of the hot water that brings on the effect of the stuff, you see. Any time from a few hours to a few days after administration. It's quite a simple chemical reaction, and it couldn't possibly be detected by analysis. It would just look like heart failure." Pender eyed him uneasily. He did not like the smile. It was not only derisive, it was smug. It was almost gloating, triumphant. He could not quite put a name to it. "You know," pursued the man, thoughtfully pulling a pipe from his pocket and beginning to fill it, "it is very odd how often one seems to read of people being found dead in their baths. It must be a very common accident. Quite temptingly so. After all, there is a fascination about murder. The thing grows upon one. That is, I imagine it would, you know." "Very likely," said Pender. "Look at Palmer, look at Gesina Gottfried, look at Armstrong. No, I wouldn't trust anybody with that formula, not even a virtuous young man like yourself." The long white fingers tamped the tobacco firmly into the bowl and struck a match. "But how about you?" said Pender, irritated. "Nobody cares to be called a virtuous young man." "If nobody is fit to be trusted, I'm not, eh?" replied the man. "Well, that's true, but it's past praying for now, isn't it? I know the thing and I can't unknow it again. It's unfortunate, but there it is. At any rate, you have the comfort of knowing that nothing disagreeable is likely to happen to me." "Dear me. Rugby already. I get out here. I have a little bit of business to do at Rugby." He rose and shook himself, buttoned his raincoat about him, and pulled the shabby hat more firmly down above his enigmatic glasses. The train slowed down and stopped. With a brief good night and a crooked smile, the man stepped onto the platform. Pender watched him stride quickly away into the drizzle beyond the radius of the gaslight. "Dotty or something," said Pender, oddly relieved. "Thank goodness I seem to be going to have the carriage to myself." He returned to murder at the manse, but his attention still kept wandering. What was the name of that stuff the fellow talked about? For the life of him, he could not remember. It was on the following afternoon that Pender saw the news item. He had bought the Standard to read at lunch, and the word bath caught his eye. Otherwise he would probably have missed the paragraph altogether, for it was only a short one. Wealthy manufacturer dies in Bath. Wife's tragic discovery. A distressing discovery was made early this morning by Mrs. John Brittlesea, wife of the well-known head of Brittlesea's engineering works at Rugby. Finding that her husband, whom she had seen alive and well less than an hour previously, did not come down in time for his breakfast. She searched for him in the bathroom, where, on the door being broken down, the engineer was found lying dead in his bath, life having been extinct, according to the medical men, for half an hour. The cause of the death is pronounced to be heart failure. The deceased manufacturer? "That's an odd coincidence," said Pender. "At Rugby. I should think my unknown friend would be interested, if he is still there, doing his bit of business. I wonder what his business is, by the way. It is a very curious thing, how, when once your attention is attracted to any particular set of circumstances, that set of circumstances seems to haunt you. You get appendicitis. Immediately the newspapers are filled with paragraphs about statesmen suffering from appendicitis and victims dying of it. You learn that all your acquaintances have had it, or know friends who have had it, and either died of it or recovered from it with more surprising and spectacular rapidity than yourself. You cannot open a popular magazine without seeing its cure mentioned as one of the triumphs of modern surgery, or dip into a scientific treatise without coming across a comparison of the vermiform appendix in men and monkeys. Probably these references to appendicitis are equally frequent at all times, but you only notice them when your mind is attuned to the subject. At any rate, it was in this way that Pender accounted to himself for the extraordinary frequency with which people seemed to die in their baths at this period. The thing pursued him at every turn. Always the same sequence of events: the hot bath, the discovery of the corpse, the inquest. Always the same medical opinion: heart failure following immersion in too hot water. It began to seem to Pender that it was scarcely safe to enter a hot bath at all. He took to making his own bath cooler and cooler every day, until it almost ceased to be enjoyable. He skimmed his paper each morning for headlines about baths before settling down to read the news, and was at once relieved and vaguely disappointed if a week passed without a hot bath tragedy. One of the sudden deaths that occurred in this way was that of a young and beautiful woman whose husband, an analytical chemist, had tried without success to divorce her a few months previously. The coroner displayed a tendency to suspect foul play and put the husband through a severe cross-examination. There seemed, however, to be no getting behind the doctor's evidence. Pender, brooding fancifully over the improbable possible, wished, as he did every day of the week, that he could remember the name of that drug the man in the train had mentioned. Then came the excitement in Pender's own neighbourhood. An old Mr. Skimmings, who lived alone with a housekeeper in a street just round the corner, was found dead in his bathroom. His heart had never been strong. The housekeeper told the milkman that she had always expected something of the sort to happen, for the old gentleman would always take his bath so hot. Pender went to the inquest. The housekeeper gave her evidence. Mr. Skimmings had been the kindest of employers, and she was heartbroken at losing him. No, she had not been aware that Mr. Skimmings had left her a large sum of money, but it was just like his goodness of heart. The verdict was death by misadventure. Pender that evening went out for his usual stroll with the dog. Some feeling of curiosity moved him to go round past the late Mr. Skimmings' house. As he loitered by, glancing up at the blank windows, the garden gate opened and a man came out. In the light of a street lamp, Pender recognized him at once. "Hello," he said. "Oh, it's you, is it?" said the man. "Viewing the site of the tragedy, eh? What do you think about it all?" "Oh, nothing very much," said Pender. "I didn't know him. Odd, our meeting again like this." "Yes, isn't it? You live near here, I suppose?" "Yes," said Pender, and then wished he hadn't. "Do you live in these parts too?" "Me?" said the man. "Oh, no. I was only here on a little matter of business." "Last time we met," said Pender, "you had business at Rugby." They had fallen into step together and were walking slowly down to the turning Pender had to take in order to reach his house. "So I had," agreed the other man. "My business takes me all over the country. I never know where I may be wanted next." "It was while you were at Rugby that old Brittlesea was found dead in his bath, wasn't it?" remarked Pender carelessly. "Yes. Funny thing, coincidence?" The man glanced up at him sideways through his glittering glasses. "Left all his money to his wife, didn't he? She's a rich woman now. Good-looking girl, a lot younger than he was." They were passing Pender's gate. "Come in and have a drink," said Pender, and again immediately regretted the impulse. The man accepted, and they went into Pender's bachelor study. "Remarkable lot of these bath deaths there have been lately, haven't there?" observed Pender carelessly, as he splashed soda into the tumblers. "You think it's remarkable," said the man, with his usual irritating trick of querying everything that was said to him. "Well, I don't know. Perhaps it is. But it's always a fairly common accident. I suppose I've been taking more notice on account of that conversation we had in the train." Pender laughed, a little self-consciously. "It just makes me wonder, you know how one does, whether anybody else had happened to hit on that drug you mentioned. What was its name?" The man ignored the question. "Oh, I shouldn't think so," he said. "I fancy I'm the only person who knows about that. I only stumbled on the thing by accident myself when I was looking for something else. I don't imagine it could have been discovered simultaneously in so many parts of the country. But all these verdicts just show, don't they, what a safe way it would be of getting rid of a person." "You're a chemist, then?" asked Pender, catching at the one phrase which seemed to promise information. "Oh, I'm a bit of everything. Sort of general utility man. I do a good bit of studying on my own, too. You've got one or two interesting books here, I see." Pender was flattered. For a man in his position, he had been in a bank until he came into that little bit of money. He felt that he had improved his mind to some purpose, and he knew that his collection of modern first editions would be worth money some day. He went over to the glass-fronted bookcase and pulled out a volume or two to show his visitor. The man displayed intelligence and presently joined him in front of the shelves. "These, I take it, represent your personal tastes?" He took down a volume of Henry James and glanced at the flyleaf. "That your name? E. Pender?" Pender admitted that it was. "You have the advantage of me," he added. "Oh, I am one of the great Smith clan," said the other with a laugh, "and work for my bread. You seem to be very nicely fixed here." Pender explained about the clerkship and the legacy. "Very nice, isn't it?" said Smith. "Not married?" "No. You're one of the lucky ones. Not likely to be needing any sulfate of any useful drugs in the near future, and you never will if you stick to what you've got and keep off women and speculation." He smiled up sideways at Pender. Now that his hat was off, Pender saw that he had a quantity of closely curled grey hair, which made him look older than he had appeared in the railway carriage. "No, I shan't be coming to you for assistance yet a while," said Pender, laughing. "Besides, how should I find you if I wanted you?" "You wouldn't have to," said Smith. "I should find you. There's never any difficulty about that." He grinned oddly. "Well, I'd better be getting on. Thank you for your hospitality. I don't expect we shall meet again, but we may, of course. Things work out so queerly, don't they?" When he had gone, Pender returned to his own armchair. He took up his glass of whisky, which stood there nearly full. "Funny," he said to himself. "I don't remember pouring that out. I suppose I got interested and did it mechanically." He emptied his glass slowly, thinking about Smith. What in the world was Smith doing at Skimming's house? An odd business altogether. if Skimming's housekeeper had known about that money. But she had not known, and if she had, how could she have found out about Smith and his sulfate of— The word had been on the tip of his tongue then. You would not need to find me. I should find you. What had the man meant by that? But this was ridiculous. Smith was not the devil, presumably. But if he really had this secret, if he liked to put a price upon it, nonsense. Business at Rugby, a little bit of business at Skimming's house. Oh, absurd. Nobody is fit to be trusted. Absolute power over another man's life. It grows on you. Lunacy. And if there was anything in it, the man was mad to tell Pender about it. If Pender chose to speak, he could get the fellow hanged. The very existence of Pender would be dangerous. That whiskey. More and more, thinking it over, Pender became persuaded that he had never poured it out. Smith must have done it while his back was turned. Why that sudden display of interest in the bookshelves? It had had no connection with anything that had gone before. Now Pender came to think of it, it had been a very stiff whiskey. Was it imagination, or had there been something about the flavour of it? A cold sweat broke out on Pender's forehead. A quarter of an hour later, after a powerful dose of mustard and water, Pender was downstairs again, very cold and shivering, huddling over the fire. He had had a narrow escape, if he had escaped. He did not know how the stuff worked, but he would not take a hot bath again for some days. One never knew. Whether the mustard and water had done the trick in time, or whether the hot bath was an essential part of the treatment, Pender's life was saved for the time being. But he was still uneasy. He kept the front door on the chain and warned his servant to let no strangers into the house. He ordered 2 more morning papers and the News of the World on Sundays, and kept a careful watch upon their columns. Deaths in baths became an obsession with him. He neglected his first editions and took to attending inquests. 3 weeks later he found himself at Lincoln. A man had died of heart failure in a Turkish bath, a fat man of sedentary habits. The jury added a rider to their verdict of misadventure, to the effect that the management should exercise a stricter supervision over the bathers and should never permit them to be left unattended in the hot room. As Pender emerged from the hall, he saw ahead of him a shabby hat that seemed familiar. He plunged after it, and caught Mr. Smith about to step into a taxi. "Smith!" he cried, gasping a little. He clutched him fiercely by the shoulder. "What, you again?" said Smith. "Taking notes of the case, eh? Can I do anything for you?" "You devil," said Pender. "You're mixed up in this. You tried to kill me the other day." "Did I? Why should I do that?" "You'll swing for this!" shouted Pender menacingly. A policeman pushed his way through the gathering crowd. "Here," said he. "What's all this about?" Smith touched his forehead significantly. "It's all right, officer," said he. "The gentleman seems to think I'm here for no good. Here's my card. The coroner knows me, but he attacked me. You'd better keep an eye on him." "That's right," said a bystander. "This man tried to kill me," said Pender. The policeman nodded. "Don't you worry about that, sir," he said. "You think better of it. The eat in there has upset you a bit. All right, all right." "But I want to charge him," said Pender. "I wouldn't do that if I was you," said the policeman. "I tell you," said Pender, "that this man Smith has been trying to poison me. He's a murderer. He's poisoned scores of people." The policeman winked at Smith. "Best be off, sir," he said. "I'll settle this. Now, my lad," he held Pender firmly by the arms, "just you keep cool and take it quiet. That gentleman's name ain't Smith nor nothing like it. You've got a bit mixed up like." "Well, what is his name?" demanded Pender. "Never you mind," replied the constable. "You leave him alone, or you'll be getting yourself into trouble." The taxi had driven away. Pender glanced round at the circle of amused faces and gave in. "All right, officer," he said. "I won't give you any trouble. I'll come round with you to the police station and tell you about it." "What do you think of that one?" asked the inspector of the sergeant when Pender had stumbled out of the station. "Up the pole and halfway round the flag, if you ask me," replied his subordinate. "Got one of them IDs fix what they talk about." "Hmm," replied the inspector. "Well, we've got his name and address. Better make a note of 'em. He might turn up again. Poisoning people so as they die in their baths, eh? That's a pretty good 'un. Wonderful how these balmy ones thinks it all out, isn't it? The spring that year was a bad one, cold and foggy. It was March when Pender went down to an inquest at Deptford, but a thick blanket of mist was hanging over the river as though it were November. The cold ate into your bones. As he sat in the dingy little court, peering through the yellow twilight of gas and fog, he could scarcely see the witnesses as they came to the table. Everybody in the place seemed to be coughing. Pender was coughing too. His bones ached, and he felt as though he were about due for a bout of influenza. Straining his eyes, he thought he recognized a face on the other side of the room, but the smarting fog which penetrated every crack stung and blinded him. He felt in his overcoat pocket, and his hand closed comfortably on something thick and heavy. Ever since that day in Lincoln, he had gone about armed for protection. Not a revolver. He was no hand with firearms. A sandbag was much better. He had bought one from an old man wheeling a barrow. It was meant for keeping out draughts from the door. A good old-fashioned affair. The inevitable verdict was returned. The spectators began to push their way out. Pender had to hurry now, not to lose sight of his man. He elbowed his way along, muttering apologies. At the door he almost touched the man, but a stout woman intervened. He plunged past her, and she gave a little squeak of indignation. The man in front turned his head, and the light over the door glinted on his glasses. Pender pulled his hat over his eyes and followed. His shoes had crepe rubber soles and made no sound on the sticking pavement. The man went on, jogging quietly up one street and down another, and never looking back. The fog was so thick that Pender was forced to keep within a few yards of him. Where was he going? Into the lighted streets? Home by bus or tram? No. He turned off to the left, down a narrow street. The fog was thicker here. Pender could no longer see his quarry, but he heard the footsteps going on before him at the same even pace. It seemed to him that they were two alone in the world, pursued and pursuer, slayer and avenger. The street began to slope more rapidly. They must be coming out somewhere near the river. Suddenly the dim shapes of the houses fell away on either side. There was an open space with a lamp vaguely visible in the middle. The footsteps paused. Pender, silently hurrying after, saw the man standing close beneath the lamp, apparently consulting something in a notebook. 4 steps, and Pender was upon him. He drew the sandbag from his pocket. The man looked up. "I've got you this time," said Pender, and struck with all his force. Pender had been quite right. He did get influenza. It was a week before he was out and about again. The weather had changed, and the air was fresh and sweet. In spite of the weakness left by the malady, he felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He tottered down to a favourite bookshop of his in the Strand and picked up a D.H. Lawrence first at a price which he knew to be a bargain. Encouraged by this, he turned into a small chop-house, chiefly frequented by Fleet Street men, and ordered a grilled cutlet and a half-tankard of bitter. 2 journalists were seated at the next table. "Going to poor old Buckley's funeral?" asked one. "Yes," said the other. "Poor devil. Fancy his getting sloshed on the head like that. He must have been on his way down to interview the widow of that fellow who died in a bath. It's a rough district. Probably one of Jimmy the Card's crowd had it in for him. He was a great crime reporter. They won't get another like Bill Buckley in a hurry. He was a decent sort, too. Great old sport. No end of a leg puller. Remember his great stunt about sulfate of thanatol?" Pender started. That was the word that had eluded him for so many months. A curious dizziness came over him, and he took a pull at the tankard to steady himself. "Looking at you as sober as a judge," the journalist was saying. He used to work off that wheeze on poor boobs in railway carriages to see how they'd take it. Would you believe that one chap actually offered him— "Hello," interrupted his friend. "That bloke over there has fainted. I thought he was looking a bit white." The Haunted Policeman by Dorothy Sayers. "Good God," said his lordship. "Did I do that?" "All the evidence points that way," replied his wife. Then I can only say that I never knew so convincing a body of evidence produced such an inadequate result. The nurse appeared to take this reflection personally. She said in a tone of rebuke, "He's a beautiful boy." Said Peter. He adjusted his eyeglass more carefully. "Well, you're the expert witness. Hand him over." The nurse did so, with a dubious air. She was relieved to see that this disconcerting parent handled the child competently, as, in a man who was an experienced uncle, was not, after all, so very surprising. Lord Peter sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed. "Do you feel it's up to standard?" he inquired with some anxiety. "Of course, your workmanship's always sound, but you never know with these collaborate efforts." "I think it'll do," said Harriet drowsily. "Good." He turned abruptly to the nurse. "All right, we'll keep it. Take it and put it away and tell him to invoice it to me. It's a very interesting addition to you, Harriet, but it would have been a hell of a rotten substitute." His voice wavered a little, for the last 24 hours had been trying ones, and he had had the fright of his life. The doctor, who had been doing something in the other room, entered in time to catch the last words. "There was never any likelihood of that, you goop," he said cheerfully. "Now you've seen all there is to be seen, and you'd better run away and play." He led his charge firmly to the door. "Go to bed," he advised him in kindly accents. "You look all in." "I'm all right," said Peter. "I haven't been doing anything. And look here." He stabbed a belligerent finger in the direction of the adjoining room. "Tell those nurses of yours, if I want to pick my son up, I'll pick him up. If his mother wants to kiss him, she can damn well kiss him. I'll have none of your infernal hygiene in my house." "Very well," said the doctor. "Just as you like. Anything for a quiet life. I rather believe in a few healthy germs myself. Builds up resistance? No thanks, I won't have a drink. I've got to go on to another one, and an alcoholic breath impairs confidence." "Another one," said Peter aghast. "One of my hospital mothers. You're not the only fish in the sea by a long chalk, one born every minute. God, what a hell of a world." They passed down the great curved stair. In the hall a sleepy footman clung, yawning, to his post of duty. "All right, William," said Peter. "Buzz off now, I'll lock up." He let the doctor out. "Good night, and thanks very much, old man. I'm sorry I swore at you." "They mostly do," replied the doctor philosophically. "Well, bung-ho, Flim. I'll look in again later just to earn my fee, but I shan't be wanted. You've married into a good tough family, and I congratulate you." The car, spluttering and protesting a little after its long wait in the cold, drove off, leaving Peter alone on the doorstep. Now that it was all over and he could go to bed, he felt extraordinarily wakeful. He would have liked to go to a party. He leaned back against the wrought-iron railings and lit a cigarette, staring vaguely into the lamp-lit dusk of the square. It was thus that he saw the policeman. The blue uniformed figure came up from the direction of South Audley Street. He too was smoking, and he walked, not with the firm tramp of a constable on his beat, but with the hesitating step of a man who has lost his bearings. When he came in sight, he had pushed back his helmet and was rubbing his head in a puzzled manner. Official habit made him look sharply at the bare-headed gentleman in evening dress, abandoned on a doorstep at 3 a.m. But since the gentleman appeared to be sober and bore no signs of being about to commit a felony, he averted his gaze and prepared to pass on. "Morning, officer," said the gentleman as he came abreast with him. "Morning, sir," said the policeman. "You're off duty early," pursued Peter, who wanted somebody to talk to. "Come in and have a drink." This offer reawakened all the official suspicion. "Not just now, sir. Thank you," replied the policeman guardedly. "Yes, now that's the point." Peter tossed away his cigarette end. It described a fiery arc in the air and shot out a little train of sparks as it struck the pavement. "I've got a son." "Oh, said the policeman, relieved by this innocent confidence. "You're first, eh? And last, if I know anything about it." "That's what my brother says every time," said the policeman. "Never know more, he says. He's got 11. Well, sir, good luck to it. I see how you're situated and thank you kindly. But after what the sergeant said, I don't know as I better." though if I was to die this moment, not a drop has passed me lips since me supper beer." Peter put his head on one side and considered this. "The sergeant said you were drunk." "He did, sir." "And you were not?" "No, sir. I saw everything just the same as I told him, though what's become of it now is more than I can say. But drunk I was not, sir, no more than you are yourself." "Then," said Peter, "as Mr. Joseph Surface remarked to Lady Teazle, what is troubling you is the consciousness of your own innocence. He insinuated that you had looked on the wine when it was red. You'd better come in and make it so. You'll feel better." The policeman hesitated. "Well, sir, I don't know. Fact is, I've had a bit of a shock." "So've I," said Peter. "Come in for God's sake and keep me company." "Well, sir," said the policeman again. He mounted the steps slowly. The logs in the hall chimney were glowing a deep red through their ashes. Peter raked them apart so that the young flame shot up between them. "Sit down," he said. "I'll be back in a moment." The policeman sat down, removed his helmet and stared about him, trying to remember who occupied the big house at the corner of the square. The engraved coat of arms upon the great silver bowl on the chimney-piece told him nothing, even though it was repeated in colour upon the backs of 2 tapestried chairs. 3 white mice skipping upon a black ground. Peter, returning quietly from the shadows beneath the stair, caught him as he traced the outlines with a thick finger. "A student of heraldry," he said. "17th century work and not very graceful. You're new to this beat, aren't you? My name's Whimsy." He put down a tray on the table. "If you'd rather have beer or whiskey, say so. These bottles are only a concession to my mood." The policeman eyed the long necks and bulging silver-wrapped corks with curiosity. "Champagne?" he said. "Never tasted it, sir, but I'd like to try the stuff." "You'll find it thin," said Peter, "but if you drink enough of it, you'll tell me the story of your life." The cork popped, and the wine frothed out into the wide glasses. "Well," said the policeman, "here's to your good lady, sir, and the new young gentleman. Long life and all the best. A bit in the nature of cider, ain't it, sir?" "Just a trifle. Give me your opinion after the 3rd glass, if you can put up with it so long. And thanks for your good wishes. You a married man?" "Not yet, sir. Hoping to be when I get promotion. If only the sergeant, but that's neither here nor there. You've been married long, sir, if I may ask?" "Just over a year." "Ah, and do you find it comfortable, sir?" Peter laughed. "I've spent the last 24 hours wondering why, when I'd had the blazing luck to get onto a perfectly good thing, I should be fool enough to risk the whole show on a damned silly experiment." The policeman nodded sympathetically. "I see what you mean, sir. Seems to me life's like that. If you don't take risks, you get nowhere. If you do, things may go wrong, and then where are you? And half the time when things happen, they happen first, before you can even think about 'em." "Quite right," said Peter, and filled the glasses again. He found the policeman soothing. True to his class and training, he turned naturally in moments of emotion to the company of the common man. Indeed, when the recent domestic crisis had threatened to destroy his nerve, he had headed for the butler's pantry with the swift instinct of the homing pigeon. There they had treated him with great humanity and allowed him to clean the silver. With a mind oddly clarified by champagne and lack of sleep, he watched the constable's reaction to Paul Roger, 1926. The first glass had produced a philosophy of life. The second produced a name, Alfred Burt, and a further hint of some mysterious grievance against the station sergeant. The third glass, as prophesied, produced the story. "You were right, sir," said the policeman. "When you spotted I was new to the beat. I only come on it at the beginning of the week, and that accounts for me not being acquainted with you, sir, nor with most of the residents about here. Jessup, now, he knows everybody, and so did Pinker, but he's been took off to another division. You'd remember Pinker, big chap, make two of me with a sandy moustache. Yes, I thought you would. Well, sir, as I was saying, me knowing the district in a general way, but not, so to speak, like the palm o' me, and might account for me making a bit of a fool of myself, but it don't account for me seeing what I did see. See it I did, and not drunk nor nothing like it. And as for making a mistake in the number, well, that might happen to anybody. All the same, sir, 13 was the number I see, plain as the nose on your face." "You can't put it stronger than that," said Peter, whose nose was of a kind difficult to overlook. "You know Merriman's End, sir?" "I think I do. Isn't it a long cul-de-sac running somewhere at the back of South Audley Street, with a row of houses on one side and a high wall on the other?" "That's right, sir. Tall, narrow houses they are, all alike, with deep porches and pillars to them." "Yes. Like an escape from the worst square in Pimlico. Horrible. Fortunately, I believe the street was never finished, or we should have had another row of the monstrosities on the opposite side. This house is pure 18th century. How does it strike you?" P.C. Burt contemplated the wide hall, the Adam fireplace and panelling with their graceful, shallow mouldings, the pedimented doorways, the high, round-headed window-lighting hall and gallery, the noble proportions of the stair. He sought for a phrase. "It's a gentleman's house," he pronounced at length. "Room to breathe, if you see what I mean. Seems like you couldn't act vulgar in it." He shook his head. "Mind you, I wouldn't call it cosy. It ain't the place I'd choose to sit down to a kipper in me shirt-sleeves. But it's got class. I never thought about it before, but now you mention it, I see what's wrong with them other houses in Merriman's End. They're sort of squeezed-like. I've been into more than one of them tonight, and that's what they are. They're squeezed, but I was going to tell you about that." "Just upon midnight it was," pursued the policeman, "when I turns into Merriman's End in the ordinary course of my duties. I'd got pretty near down toward the far end when I see a fellow lurking about in a suspicious way under the wall. There's back gates there, you know, sir, leading into some gardens, and this chap was hanging about inside one of the gateways. A rough-looking fellow in a baggy old coat, might have been a tramp off the embankment. I turned my light on him. That street's not very well lit, and it's a dark night. But I couldn't see much of his face because he had on a ragged old hat and a big scarf round his neck. I thought he was up to no good, and I was just about to ask him what he was doing there, when I hear a most awful yell come out of one of them houses opposite. Ghastly it was, sir. 'Help!' it said. 'Murder! Help! Fit to freeze your marrow!' Man's voice or woman's? Man's, sir, I think. More of a roaring kind of yell, if you take my meaning. I says, 'Hello, what's up there? Which house is it?' The chap says nothing, but he points, and him and me runs across together. Just as we gets to the house, there's a noise like as if someone was being strangled just inside, and a thump, as it might be something falling against the door. 'Good God!' said Peter. I gives a shout and rings the bell. 'Hoi,' I says, 'what's up here?' And then I knocked on the door. There's no answer, so I rings and knocks again. Then the chap who was with me, he pushed open the letter flap and squints through it. 'Was there a light in the house?' 'It was all dark, sir, except the fanlight over the door. That was lit up bright, and when I looks up I see the number of the house, number 13, painted plain as you like on the transom. Well, this chap peers in, and all of a sudden he gives a kind of gurgle and falls back. 'Here,' I says, 'what's amiss? Let me have a look.' So I puts me eye to the flap, and I looks in." P.C. Burt paused and drew a long breath. Peter cut the wire of the second bottle. "Now, sir," said the policeman, "believe me or believe me not, I was as sober at that moment as I am now. I can tell you everything I see in that house, same as if it was wrote up there on that wall. Not as it was a great lot, because the flap wasn't all that wide, but by squinnying a bit, I could make shift to see right across the hall and a piece on both sides, and part way up the stairs. And here's what I see, and you take notice of every word, on account of what come after." He took another gulp of the Pol Roger to loosen his tongue and continued, "There was the floor of the hall. I could see that very plain. All black and white squares it was, like marble, and it stretched back a good long way. About halfway along on the left was the staircase, with a red carpet, and the figure of a white naked woman at the foot, carrying a big pot of blue and yellow flowers. In the wall, next the stairs, there was an open door, and a room all lit up. I could just see the end of a table, with a lot of glass and silver on it. Between that door and the front door, there was a big black cabinet, shiny with gold figures painted on it, like them things they had at the exhibition. Right at the back of the hall, there was a place like a conservatory, but I couldn't see what was in it, only it looked very gay. There was a door on the right, and that was open too. A very pretty drawing room by what I could see of it, with pale blue paper and pictures on the walls. There were pictures in the hall too, and a table on the right with a copper bowl, like as it might be for visitors' cards to be put in. Now, I see all that, sir, and I put it to you. If it hadn't have been there, how could I describe so plain? I have known people describe what wasn't there, said Peter thoughtfully, but it was seldom anything of that kind. Rats, cats, and snakes I have heard of, and occasionally naked female figures, but delirious lacquer cabinets and hall tables are new to me. As you say, sir, agreed the policeman, and I see you believe me so far. But here's something else, what you mayn't find so easy. There was a man laying in that hall, sir, as sure as I sit here, and he was dead. He was a big man and clean-shaven, and he wore evening dress. Somebody had stuck a knife into his throat. I could see the handle of it. It looked like a carving knife, and the blood had run out all shiny over the marble squares. The policeman looked at Peter, passed his handkerchief over his forehead, and finished the fourth glass of champagne. His head was up against the end of the hall table, he went on, and his feet must have been up against the door, but I couldn't see anything quite close to me because of the bottom of the letterbox. You understand, sir? I was looking through the wire cage of the box, and there was something inside, letters, I suppose, that cut off my view downwards. But I see all the rest, in front and a bit of both sides, and it must have been regularly burnt in upon me brain, as they say, for I don't suppose I was looking more than a quarter of a minute or so. Then all the lights went out at once, same as if somebody has turned off the main switch. So I looks round, and I don't mind telling you I felt a bit queer. And when I looks round, lo and behold, my bloke in the muffler had hopped it. The devil he had, said Peter. Hopped it, repeated the policeman. And there I was. And just there, sir, is where I made my big mistake, for I thought he couldn't have got far, and I started off up the street after him. But I couldn't see him, and I couldn't see nobody. All the houses was dark, and it come over me what a sight of funny things may go on, and nobody take a mite of notice. The way I'd shouted and banged on the door, you'd have thought it'd have brought out every soul in the street, not to mention that awful yelling. But there, you may have noticed it yourself, sir. A man may leave his ground-floor windows open, or have his chimney afire, and you may make noise enough to wake the dead, trying to draw his attention, and nobody give no heed. He's fast asleep, and the neighbours say, "Blast that row, but it's no business of mine," and stick their heads under the bedclothes. Yes, said Peter, London's like that. That's right, sir. A village is different. You can't pick up a pin there without somebody coming up to ask where you got it from. But London keeps itself to itself. Well, something'll have to be done, I thinks to myself, and I blows me whistle. They heard that all right. Windows started to go up all along the street. That's London, too. Peter nodded. London will sleep through the last trump. Puddly in the rut and doddering in the dumps will look down their noses and put on virtuous airs. But God, who is never surprised, will say to his angel, "Whistle up 'em, Michael, whistle 'em up. East and west will rise from the dead at the sound of the policeman's whistle." "Quite so, sir," said P.C. Burt, and wondered for the first time whether there might not be something in this champagne stuff after all. He waited for a moment, and then resumed. "Well, it so happened that just when I sounded my whistle, Withers, that's the man on the other beat, was in Audley Square, coming to meet me. You know, sir, we has times for meeting one another, arranged different like every night, and 12 o'clock in the square was our rendezvous tonight. So up he comes in, you might say, no time at all, and finds me there, with everyone a-hollering at me from the windows to know what was up. Well, naturally, I didn't want the whole bunch of 'em running out into the street and our man getting away in the crowd, so I just tells 'em there's nothing, only a bit of an accident farther along. And then I see Withers, and glad enough I was. We stands there at the top of the street, and I tells him there's a dead man laying in the hall at number 13, and it looks to me like murder. "Number 13, he says. "You can't mean number 13. There ain't no number 13 in Merriman's End, you fathead. It's all even numbers. And so it is, sir, for the houses on the other side were never built, so there's no odd numbers at all bar in number 1, as is the big house on the corner. Well, that gave me a bit of a jolt. I wasn't so much put out at not having remembered about the numbers, for as I tell you, I never was on the beat before this week. No, but I knew I'd seen that their number writ up plain as pie on the fanlight, and I didn't see how I could have been mistaken. But when Withers heard the rest of the story, he thought maybe I'd misread it for number 12. It couldn't be 18, for there's only 16 houses in the road, nor it couldn't be 16 neither, for I knew it wasn't the end house. But we thought it might be 12 or 10, so away we goes to look. We didn't have no difficulty about getting in at number 12. There was a very pleasant old gentleman came down in his dressing gown, asking what the disturbance was, and could he be of use. I apologized for disturbing him, and said I was afraid there'd been an accident in one of the houses, and had he heard anything? Of course, the minute he opened the door, I could see it wasn't number 12 we wanted. There was only a little hall with polished boards, and the walls plain panelled, all very bare and neat, and no black cabinet, nor naked woman, nor nothing. The old gentleman said yes. His son had heard somebody shouting and knocking a few minutes earlier. He'd got up and put his head out of the window, but couldn't see nothing, but they both thought from the sound it was number 14 forgotten his latchkey again. So we thanked him very much and went on to number 14. We had a bit of a job to get number 14 downstairs. A fiery sort of gentleman he was, something in the military way, I thought, but he turned out to be a retired Indian civil servant, a dark gentleman with a big voice, and his servant was dark too. The gentleman wanted to know what the blazes all this row was about, why a decent citizen wasn't allowed to get his proper sleep. He supposed that young fool at number 12 was drunk again. Withers had to speak a bit sharp to him, but at last came down and let us in. Well, we had to apologize once more. The hall was not a bit like. The staircase was on the wrong side, for one thing, and though there was a statue at the foot of it, it was some kind of a heathen idol with a lot of heads and arms, and the walls were covered with all sorts of brass stuff and native goods, you know the kind of thing. There was a black and white linoleum on the floor, and that was about all there was to it. The servant had a soft sort of way with him I didn't half like. He said he slept at the back and had heard nothing till his master rang for him. Then the gentleman came to the top of the stairs and shouted out, it was no use disturbing him. The noise came from number 12 as usual, and if that young man didn't stop his blanky bohemian goings-on, he'd have the law on his father. I asked if he'd seen anything, and he said, no, he hadn't. Of course, sir, me and that other chap was inside the porch, and you can't see anything what goes on inside those porches from the other houses, because they're filled in at the sides with coloured glass. All the lot of them. Lord Peter Wimsey looked at the policeman, and then looked at the bottle, as though estimating the alcoholic content of each. With deliberation, he filled both glasses again. Well, sir, said P.C. Burt after refreshing himself, by this time Withers was looking at me in rather an old-fashioned manner. However, he said nothing, and we went back to number 10, where there was 2 maiden ladies and a hall full of stuffed birds and wallpaper like a florist's catalogue. The one who slept in the front was deaf as a post, and the one who slept at the back hadn't heard nothing. But we got hold of their maids, and the cook said she'd heard the voice calling, help, and thought it was in number 12, and she'd hid her head in the pillow and said her prayers. The housemaid was a sensible girl. She'd looked out when she heard me knocking. She couldn't see anything at first, owing to us being in the porch, but she thought something must be going on, so, not wishing to catch cold, she went back to put on her bedroom slippers. When she got back to the window, she was just in time to see a man running up the road. He went very quick and very silent, as if he had goloshes on, and she could see the ends of his muffler flying out behind him. She saw him run out of the street and turn to the right, and then she heard me coming along after him. Unfortunately, her eye being on the man, she didn't notice which porch I came out of. Well, that showed I wasn't inventing the whole story at any rate, because there was my bloke in the muffler. The girl didn't recognize him at all, but that wasn't surprising, because she'd only just entered the old lady's service. Besides, it wasn't likely the man had anything to do with it, because he was outside with me when the yelling started. My belief is, He was the sort as doesn't care to have his pockets examined too close, and the minute my back was turned, he thought he'd be better and more comfortable elsewhere. "Now there ain't no need," continued the policeman, "for me to trouble you, sir, with all them houses what we went into. We made inquiries at the whole lot from number 2 to number 16, and there wasn't one of them had a hall in any ways conformable to what that chap and I saw through the letterbox, nor there wasn't a soul in 'em could give us any help more than what we'd had already. You see, sir, though it took me a bit of time telling, it all went very quick. There was the yells. They didn't last beyond a few seconds or so, and before they was finished, we was across the road and inside the porch. Then there was me shouting and knocking, but I hadn't been long at that afore the chap with me looks through the box. Then I has my look inside, for 15 seconds it might be, and while I'm doing that, my chap's away up the street. Then I runs after him, and then I blows me whistle. The whole thing might take a minute or a minute and a half, maybe, not more. Well, sir, by the time we'd been into every house in Merriman's End, I was feeling a bit queer again. I can tell you, and Withers, he was looking queerer. He says to me, "Bert," he says, "is this your idea of a joke? Because if so, the old-born empire's where you ought to be, not the police force." So I tells him over again, most solemn, what I seen. "And," I says, "if only we could lay hands on that chap in the muffler, he could tell you he's seen it too. And what's more," I says, "do you think I'd risk me job, playing a silly trick like that?" He says, "Well, it beats me," he says. "If I didn't know you was a sober kind of chap, I'd say you was seeing things." "Things?" I says to him. "I see that their corpse are laying there with a knife in his neck, and that was enough for me. Horrible, he looked, and the blood all over the floor. Well," he says, "maybe he wasn't dead after all, and they've cleared him out of the way." "And cleared the house away too, I suppose?" I said to him. So Withers says, in an odd sort of voice, "You're sure about the house? You wasn't letting your imagination run away with you over naked females and such?" "That was a nice thing to say," I said. "No, I wasn't. There's been some monkey business going on in this street, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it, if we has to comb out London for that chap in the muffler." "Yes," says Withers, nasty-like. "It's a pity he cleared off so sudden." "Well," I says, "you can't say I imagined him, anyhow, because that there girl saw him, and a mercy she did," I said, "or you'd be saying next I ought to be in Colney Hatch." "Well," he says, "I don't know what you think you're going to do about it. You better ring up the station and ask for instructions." Which I did, and Sergeant Jones, he come down himself, and he listens attentive-like to what we both has to say, and then he walks along the street, slow-like, from end to end, and then he comes back and says to me, "Now, Bert," he says, "just you describe that hall to me again, careful." Which I does, same as I described it to you, sir. And he says, "You're sure there was the room on the left of the stairs with the glass and silver on the table, and the room on the right with the pictures in it?" And I says, "Yes, Sergeant, I'm quite sure of that." And Withers says, "Ah," in a kind of got-you-now voice, if you take my meaning. And the sergeant says, "Now, Bert," he says, "pull yourself together and take a look at these here houses. Don't you see they're all single-fronted? There ain't one on 'em has rooms, both sides of the front hall. Look at the windows, you fool," he says. Lord Peter poured out the last of the champagne. "I don't mind telling you, sir," went on the policeman, "that I was fair knocked silly to think of me never noticing that. Withers had noticed it all right, and that's what made him think I was drunk or balmy. But I stuck to what I'd seen. I said, there must be 2 of them houses knocked into one somewhere, but that didn't work, because we'd been into all of them, and there wasn't no such thing, not without there was one of them concealed doors like you read about in crook stories. Well, anyhow," I says to the sergeant, "the yells was real all right because other people heard 'em. Just you ask, and they'll tell you." So the sergeant says, "Well, Bert, I'll give you every chance." So he knocks up number 12 again, not wishing to annoy number 14 any more than he was already, and this time the sun comes down. An agreeable gentleman he was, too, not a bit put out. He says, "Oh, yes, he'd heard the yells, and his father had heard them too. Number 14, he says, that's where the trouble is. A very odd bloke is number 14, and I shouldn't be surprised if he beats that unfortunate servant of his. The Englishmen abroad, you know, the outposts of empire and all that kind of thing. They're rough and ready, and then the curry in them parts is bad for the liver." So I was inquiring at number 14 again, but the sergeant, he loses patience and says, "You know quite well," he says. "It ain't number 14, and in my opinion, Bert, you're either dotty or drunk. You best go home straight away," he says, "and sober up, and I'll see you again when you can give a better account of yourself." So I argues a bit, but it ain't no use, and away he goes, and Withers goes back to his beat. And I walks up and down a bit till Jessup comes to take over, and then I comes away. And that's when I sees you, sir. But I ain't drunk, sir. At least I wasn't then, though there do seem to be a kind of a swimming in me head at this moment. Maybe that stuff's stronger than it tastes. But I wasn't drunk then, and I'm pretty sure I'm not dotty. I'm haunted, sir. That's what it is. Haunted. It might be there was someone killed in one of them houses many years ago, and that's what I see tonight. Perhaps they changed the numbering of the street on account of it. I've heard tell of such things, and when the same night comes round, the house goes back to what it was before. But there I am, with a black mark against me, and it ain't a fair trick for no ghost to go getting a plain man into trouble, and I'm sure, sir, you'll agree with me. The policeman's narrative had lasted some time, and the hands of the grandfather clock stood at 5:15. Peter Wimsey gazed benevolently at his companion, for whom he was beginning to feel a positive affection. He was, if anything, slightly more drunk than the policeman, for he had missed tea and had no appetite for his dinner. But the wine had not clouded his wits. It had only increased excitability and postponed sleep. He said, "When you looked through the letterbox, could you see any part of the ceiling or the lights?" "No, sir, on account, you see, of the flap. I could see right and left and straight forward, but not upwards, and none of the near part of the floor." "When you looked at the house from outside, there was no light except through the fanlight, but when you looked through the flap, all the rooms were lit, right and left and at the back." "That's so, sir." "Are there back doors to the houses?" "Yes, sir, coming out of Merriman's End. You turn to the right, and there's an opening a little way along which takes you to the back doors." "You seem to have a very distinct visual memory. I wonder if your other kinds of memory are as good. Can you tell me, for instance, whether any of the houses you went into had any particular smell, especially 10, 12, and 14? "Smell, sir?" The policeman closed his eyes to stimulate recollection. "Why, yes, sir. Number 10, where the two ladies live, that had a sort of an old-fashioned smell. I can't put me tongue to it. Not lavender, but something as ladies keeps in bowls and such. Rose leaves and what not. Pot-pourri, that's the stuff. Pot-pourri. And number 12. Well, no, there was nothing particular there, except I remember thinking they must keep pretty good servants, though we didn't see anybody except the family. All that floor and panelling was polished beautiful. You could see your face in it. Beeswax and turpentine, I says to myself, and elbow grease. What you'd call a clean house with a good, clean smell. But number 14, that was different. I didn't like the smell of that. Stuffy. There had been burning some of that there incense to his idols, maybe. I never could abide. "Ah," said Peter, "what you say is very suggestive." He placed his fingertips together and shot his last question over them. "Ever been inside the National Gallery?" "No, sir," said the policeman, astonished. "I can't say as I ever was." "That's London again," said Peter. "We're the last people in the world to know anything of our great metropolitan institutions. Now, what is the best way to tackle this bunch of toughs, I wonder? It's a little early for a call. Still, there's nothing like doing one's good deed before breakfast, and the sooner you're set right with the sergeant, the better. Let me see. Yes, I think that may do it. Costume pieces are not as a rule in my line, but my routine has been so much upset already, one way and another, that an irregularity, more or less, will hardly matter. Wait there for me while I have a bath and change. I may be a little time, but it would hardly be decent to get there before 6. The bath had been an attractive thought, but was perhaps ill-advised, for a curious languor stole over him with the touch of the hot water. The champagne was losing its effervescence. It was with an effort that he dragged himself out and reawakened himself with a cold shower. The matter of dress required a little thought. A pair of grey flannel trousers was easily found, and though they were rather too well creased for the part he meant to play, he thought that with luck they would probably pass unnoticed. The shirt was a difficulty. His collection of shirts was a notable one, but they were mostly of an inconspicuous and gentlemanly sort. He hesitated for some time over a white shirt with an open sports collar, but decided at length upon a blue one, bought as an experiment, and held to be not quite successful. A red tie, if he had possessed such a thing, would have been convincing. After some consideration, he remembered that he had seen his wife in a rather wide Liberty tie, whose prevailing colour was orange. That, he felt, would do if he could find it. On her, it had looked rather well. On him, it would be completely abominable. He went through into the next room. It was queer to find it empty. A peculiar sensation came over him. Here he was, rifling his wife's drawers, and there she was, spirited out of reach at the top of the house with a couple of nurses and an entirely new baby, which might turn into goodness knew what. He sat down before the glass and stared at himself. He felt as though he ought to have changed somehow in the night, but he only looked unshaven and, he thought, a trifle intoxicated. Both were quite good things to look at the moment, though hardly suitable for the father of a family. He pulled out all the drawers in the dressing table. They emitted vaguely familiar smells of face powder and handkerchief sachet. He tried the big built-in wardrobe, frocks, costumes, and trays full of underwear, which made him feel sentimental. At last, he struck a promising vein of gloves and stockings. The next tray held ties, the orange of the desired Liberty creation gleaming in a friendly way among them. He put it on, and observed with pleasure that the effect was bohemian beyond description. He wandered out again, leaving all the drawers open behind him as though a burglar had passed through the room. An ancient tweed jacket of his own, of a very countrified pattern, suitable only for fishing in Scotland, was next unearthed, together with a pair of brown canvas shoes. He secured his trousers by a belt, searched for and found an old soft-brimmed felt hat of no recognizable colour, and, after removing a few trout flies from the hatband and tucking his shirt sleeves well up inside the coat sleeve, decided that he would do. As an afterthought, he returned to his wife's room and selected a wide woolen scarf in a shade of greenish blue. Thus equipped, he came downstairs again to find P.C. Burt fast asleep, with his mouth open and snoring. Peter was hurt. Here he was, sacrificing himself in the interests of this stupid policeman, and the man hadn't the common decency to appreciate it. However, there was no point in waking him yet. He yawned horribly and sat down. It was the footman who wakened the sleepers at 6:30. If he was surprised to see his master, very strangely attired, slumbering in the hall in company with a large policeman, he was too well trained to admit the fact even to himself. He merely removed the tray. The faint chink of glass roused Peter, who slept like a cat at all times. "Hello, William," he said. "Have I overslept myself? What's the time?" 5:20 to 7, my lord." Just about right. He remembered that the footman slept on the top floor. "All quiet on the western front, William." "Not altogether quiet, my lord." William permitted himself a slight smile. "The young master was lively about 5, but all is satisfactory, I gather, from Nurse Jenkin." "Nurse Jenkin? Is that the young one? Don't let yourself be run away with, William. I say, just give P.C. Burt a light prod in the ribs, would you? He and I have business together." In Merriman's End, the activities of the morning were beginning. The milkman came jingling out of the cul-de-sac. Lights were twinkling in upper rooms. Hands were withdrawing curtains. In front of number 10, the housemaid was already scrubbing the steps. Peter posted his policeman at the top of the street. "I don't want to make my first appearance with official accompaniment," he said. "Come along when I beckon. What, by the way, is the name of the agreeable gentleman in number 12? I think he may be of some assistance to us." "Mr. O'Halloran, sir. The policeman looked at Peter expectantly. He seemed to have abandoned all initiative and to place implicit confidence in this hospitable and eccentric gentleman. Peter slouched down the street with his hands in his trousers pocket and his shabby hat pulled rakishly over his eyes. At number 12, he paused and examined the windows. Those on the ground floor were open. The house was awake. He marched up the steps, took a brief glance through the flap of the letterbox, and rang the bell. A maid in a neat blue dress and white cap and apron opened the door. "Good morning," said Peter, slightly raising the shabby hat. "Is Mr. O'Halloran in?" He gave the eyes a soft continental roll. "Not the old gentleman? I mean young Mr. O'Halloran?" "He's in," said the maid doubtfully, "but he isn't up yet." "Oh," said Peter. "Well, it is a little early for a visit, but I desire to see him urgently. There is a little trouble where I live. Could you entreat him? Would you be so kind? I have walked all the way," he added, pathetically, and with perfect truth. "Have you, sir?" said the maid. She added kindly, "You do look tired, sir, and that's a fact." "It is nothing," said Peter. "It is only that I forgot to have any dinner. But if I can see Mr. O'Halloran, it will be all right." "You'd better come in, sir," said the maid. "I'll see if I can wake him." She conducted the exhausted stranger in and offered him a chair. "What name shall I say, sir?" "Petrovinsky," said his lordship, hardily. As he had rather expected, neither the unusual name nor the unusual clothes of this unusually early visitor seemed to cause very much surprise. The maid left him in the tidy little panelled hall and went upstairs without so much as a glance at the umbrella stand. Left to himself, Peter sat still, noticing that the hall was remarkably bare of furniture, and was lit by a single electric pendant almost immediately inside the front door. The letterbox was the usual wire cage, the bottom of which had been carefully lined with brown paper. From the back of the house came a smell of frying bacon. Presently there was the sound of somebody running downstairs. A young man appeared in a dressing gown. He called out as he came, "Is that you, Stefan? Your name came up as Mr. Whiskey. Has Martha run away again, or— What the hell? Who the devil are you, sir?" "Whimsy," said Peter mildly. "Not Whiskey. Whimsy the policeman's friend. I just looked in to congratulate you on a mastery of the art of false perspective which I thought had perished with Van Hoogstraten, or at least with Grace and Lamberley." "Oh," said the young man. He had a pleasant countenance with humorous eyes and ears pointed like a fawn's. He laughed a little ruefully. "I suppose my beautiful murder is out. It was too good to last. Those bobbies. I hope to God they gave number 14 a bad night. May I ask how you come to be involved in the matter?" "I," said Peter, "am the kind of person in whom distressed constables confide. I cannot imagine why. And when I had the picture of that sturdy blue-clad figure, led so persuasively by a bohemian stranger, and invited to peer through a hole, I was irresistibly transported in mind to the National Gallery. Many a time have I squinted sideways through those holes into the little black box, and admired that Dutch interior of many vistas painted so convincingly on the 4 flat sides of the box. How right you were to preserve your eloquent silence. Your Irish tongue would have given you away. The servants, I gather, were purposely kept out of sight." "Tell me," said Mr. O'Halloran, seating himself sideways upon the hall table, "do you know by heart the occupation of every resident in this quarter of London? I do not paint under my own name." "No," said Peter. Like the good Dr. Watson, the constable could observe, though he could not reason from his observation, "It was the smell of turpentine that betrayed you. I gather that at the time of his first call the apparatus was not very far off." "It was folded together and lying under the stairs," replied the painter. "It has since been removed to the studio. My father had only just had time to get it out of the way and hitch down the 13 from the fanlight before the police reinforcements arrived. He had not even time to put back this table I am sitting on. A brief search would have discovered it in the dining room. My father is a remarkable sportsman. I cannot too highly recommend the presence of mind he displayed while I was herring around the houses and leaving him to hold the fort. It would have been so simple and so unenterprising to explain. But my father, being an Irishman, enjoys treading on the coattails of authority. I should like to meet your father. The only thing I do not thoroughly understand is the reason of this elaborate plot. Were you by any chance executing a burglary round the corner and keeping the police in play while you did it? I never thought of that, said the young man with regret in his voice. No. The bobby was not the predestined victim. He happened to be present at a full-dress rehearsal, and the joke was too good to be lost. The fact is, my uncle is Sir Lucius Preston, the R.A. Ah, said Peter, the light begins to break. My own style of draftsmanship, pursued Mr. O'Halloran, is modern. My uncle has on several occasions informed me that I draw like that only because I do not know how to draw. The idea was that he should be invited to dinner tomorrow and regaled with a story of the mysterious number 13, said to appear from time to time in this street and to be haunted by strange noises. Having thus detained him till close upon midnight, I should have set out to see him to the top of the street. As we went along, the cries would have broken out. I should have led him back. Nothing, said Peter, could be clearer. After the preliminary shock, he would have been forced to confess that your draftsmanship was a triumph of academic accuracy. I hope, said Mr. O'Halloran, the performance may still go forward as originally intended. He looked with some anxiety at Peter, who replied, I hope so indeed. I also hope that your uncle's heart is a strong one. But may I in the meantime signal to my unfortunate policeman and relieve his mind? He is in danger of losing his promotion through a suspicion that he was drunk on duty. Good God, said Mr. O'Halloran. No, I don't want that to happen. Fetch him in. The difficulty was to make P.C. Burt recognize in the daylight what he had seen by night through the letter flap. Of the framework of painted canvas, with its forms and figures oddly foreshortened and distorted, he could make little. Only when the thing was set up and lighted in the curtained studio was he at length reluctantly convinced. It's wonderful, he said. It's like Maskelyne and Devant. I wish the sergeant could have seen it. Lure him down here tomorrow night, said Mr. O'Halloran. Let him come as my uncle's bodyguard. You— He turned to Peter. You seem to have a way with policemen. Can't you inveigle the fellow along? Your impersonation of starving and disconsolate Bloomsbury is fully as convincing as mine. How about it? I don't know, said Peter. The costume gives me pain. Besides, is it kind to a PB policeman? I give you the R.A., but when it comes to the guardians of the law, damn it all, I'm a family man, and I must have some sense of responsibility. In the Teeth of the Evidence by Dorothy Sayers. Well, old son, said Mr. Lamplow, and what can we do for you today? Oh, some of your whiz-bang business, I suppose, said Lord Peter Wimsey, seating himself resentfully in the green velvet torture chair and making a face in the direction of the drill. Jolly old left-hand upper grinder come to bits on me. I was only eating an omelette, too. Can't understand why they always pick these moments. If I'd been cracking nuts or chewing peppermint jumbles, I could understand it. Yes, said Mr. Lamplow soothingly. He drew an electric bulb, complete with mirror, as though by magic out of a kind of Maskelyne and Devant contraption on Lord Peter's left. A trail of flecks followed it, issuing apparently from the bowels of the earth. Any pain? No pain, said Wimsey irritably, unless you count a sharp edge fit to saw your tongue off. Point is, why should it go pop like that? I wasn't doing anything to it. No, said Mr. Lamplow, his manner hovering between the professional and the friendly, for he was an old Winchester man and a member of one of Wimsey's clubs, and had frequently met him on the cricket field in the days of their youth. Well, if you'll stop talking half a moment, we'll have a look at it. Ah. Don't say, ah, like that, as if you'd found pyorrhea and necrosis of the jaw and were gloating over it. You damned old ghoul. Just carve it out and stop it up and be hanged to you. And by the way, what have you been up to? Why should I meet an inspector of police on your doorstep? You needn't pretend he came to have his bridge work attended to, because I saw his sergeant waiting for him outside. Well, it was rather curious, said Mr. Lamplow, dexterously gagging his friend with one hand and dabbing cotton wool into the offending cavity with the other. "I suppose I oughtn't to tell you, but if I don't, you'll get it out of your friends at Scotland Yard. They wanted to see my predecessor's books. Possibly you noticed that bit in the papers about a dental man being found dead in a blazing garage on Wimbledon Common." "Yonk, said Lord Peter Wimsey. "Last night," said Mr. Lamplow, "pooped off about 9 piperma, and it took them 3 hours to put it out. One of those wooden garages, and the big job was to keep the blaze away from the house. Fortunately, it's at the end of the row, with nobody at home. Apparently this man, Prendergast, was all alone there, just going off for a holiday or something, and he contrived to set himself and his car and his garage alight last night and was burnt to death. In fact, when they found him, he was so badly charred that they couldn't be sure it was he. So, being sticklers for routine, they had a look at his teeth." "Oh, yes," said Wimsey, watching Mr. Lamplow fitting a new drill into its socket. "Didn't anybody have a go at putting the fire out?" "Oh, yes, but as it was a wooden shed full of petrol, it simply went up like a bonfire. Just a little bit over this way, please. That's splendid. Grrr, whiz, grrr." As a matter of fact, they seem to think it might just possibly be suicide. The man's married, with 3 children, and immured and all that sort of thing. Whiz, grrr, buzz, grrr, whiz. His family's down at Worthing, staying with his mother-in-law or something. Tell me if I hurt you. Grrr. And I don't suppose he was doing any too well. Still, of course, he may easily have had an accident when filling up. I gather he was starting off that night to join them. Ow, ooh, I, inquired Wimsey naturally enough. "How do I come into it?" said Mr. Lamplow, who, from long experience, was expert in the interpretation of mumblings. "Well, only because the chap whose practice I took over here did this fellow Prendergast's dental work for him, whiz. He died, but left his books behind him for my guidance, in case any of his old patients should feel inclined to trust me. Whiz. I'm sorry. Did you feel that? As a matter of fact, some of them actually do. I suppose it's an instinct to trundle round to the same old place when you're in pain, like the dying elephants. Will you rinse, please?" "I see," said Wimsey, when he had finished washing out chips of himself and exploring his ravaged molar with his tongue. "How odd it is that these cavities always seem so large. I feel as if I could put my head into this one. Still, I suppose you know what you're about. And are Prendergast's teeth all right?" "Haven't had time to hunt through the ledger yet, but I've said I'll go down to have a look at them as soon as I've finished with you. It's my lunchtime anyway, and my 2 o'clock patient isn't coming, thank goodness. She usually brings 5 spoilt children, and they all want to sit round and watch and play with the apparatus. One of them got loose last time and tried to electrocute itself on the X-ray plant next door, and she thinks that children should be done at half price, a little wider if you can manage it. Grrr. Yes, that's very nice. Now we can dress that and put in a temporary. Rinse, please." "Yes," said Wimsey. "And for goodness sake, make it firm and not too much of your foul oil of cloves. I don't want bits to come out in the middle of dinner. You can't imagine the nastiness of caviar flavoured with cloves." "No," said Mr. Lamplow. "You may find this a little cold." Squirt, swish. "Rinse, please. You may notice it when the dressing goes in." "Oh, you did notice it? Good. That shows that the nerve's all right. Only a little longer now. There. Yes, you may get down now. Another rinse? Certainly. When would you like to come in again?" "Don't be silly, old horse," said Wimsey. "I am coming out to Wimbledon with you straight away. You'll get there twice as fast if I drive you. I've never had a corpse in blazing garage before, and I want to learn. There is nothing really attractive about corpses in blazing garages." Even Wimsey's war experience did not quite reconcile him to the object that lay on the mortuary slab in the police station. Charred out of all resemblance to humanity, it turned even the police surgeon pale, while Mr. Lamplow was so overcome that he had to lay down the books he had brought with him and retire into the open to recover himself. Meanwhile Wimsey, having put himself on terms of mutual confidence and esteem with the police officials, thoughtfully turned over the little pile of blackened odds and ends, that represented the contents of Mr. Prendergast's pockets. There was nothing remarkable about them. The leather note-case still held the remains of a thickish wad of notes, doubtless cash in hand for the holiday at Worthing. The handsome gold watch, obviously a presentation, had stopped at 9:07. Whimsy remarked on its good state of preservation. Sheltered between the left arm and the body, that seemed to be the explanation. "Looks as though the first sudden blaze had regularly overcome him," said the police inspector. "He evidently made no attempt to get out. He'd simply fallen forward over the wheel with his head on the dashboard. That's why the face is so disfigured. I'll show you the remains of the car presently, if you're interested, my lord. If the other gentleman's feeling better, we may as well take the body first." Taking the body was a long and unpleasant job. Mr. Lamplough, nerving himself with an effort and producing a pair of forceps and a probe, went gingerly over the jaws, reduced almost to their bony structure by the furnace heat to which they had been exposed, while the police surgeon checked entries in the ledger. Mr. Prendergast had a dental history extending back over 10 years in the ledger, and had already had 2 or 3 fillings done before that time. These had been noted at the time when he first came to Mr. Lamplough's predecessor. At the end of a long examination, the surgeon looked up from the notes he had been making. "Well now," he said, "let's check that again. Allowing for renewal of old work, I think we've got a pretty accurate picture of the present state of his mouth. There ought to be 9 fillings in all. Small amalgam filling in right lower back wisdom tooth, big amalgam ditto in right lower back molar, amalgam fillings in right upper first and second bicuspids at point of contact, right upper incisor crowned. That all right?" "I expect so," said Mr. Lamplough, "except that the right upper incisor seems to be missing altogether. But possibly the crown came loose and fell out." He probed delicately. "The jaw is very brittle. I can't make anything of the canal, but there's nothing against it." "We may find the crown in the garage," suggested the inspector. "Fused porcelain filling in left upper canine," went on the surgeon. "Amalgam fillings in left upper first bicuspid and lower second bicuspid and left lower 13-year-old molar. That seems to be all. No teeth missing and no artificials. How old was this man, Inspector?" "About 45, Doc." "My age, I only wish I had as good a set of teeth," said the surgeon. Mr. Lamplough agreed with him. "Then I take it this is Mr. Prendergast all right," said the inspector. "Not a doubt of it, I should say," replied Mr. Lamplough, "though I should like to find that missing crown." "We'd better go round to the house, then," said the inspector. "Well, yes, thank you, my lord. I shouldn't mind a lift in that. Some car. Well, the only point now is whether it was accident or suicide. Round to the right, my lord, and then second on the left. I'll tell you as we go." "A bit out of the way for a dental man," observed Mr. Lamplough, as they emerged upon some scattered houses near the common. The inspector made a grimace. "I thought the same, sir, but it appears Mrs. Prendergast persuaded him to come here. So good for the children. Not so good for the practice, though. If you ask me, I should say Mrs. P. was the biggest argument we have for suicide. Here we are." The last sentence was scarcely necessary. There was a little crowd about the gate of a small detached villa at the end of a row of similar houses. From a pile of dismal debris in the garden, a smell of burning still rose, disgustingly. The inspector pushed through the gate with his companions, pursued by the comments of the bystanders. "That's the inspector. That's Dr. Maggs. That'll be another doctor, him with the little bag. Who's the bloke in the eyeglass? Looks a proper nobleman, don't he, Florrie? Why, he'll be the insurance bloke. Coo! Look at his grand car. That's where the money goes. That's a Rolls, that is. No, silly, it's a Daimler. Oh, well, it's all advertisement these days." Whimsy giggled indecorously all the way up the garden path. The sight of the skeleton car amid the sodden and fire-blackened remains of the garage sobered him. 2 police constables, crouched over the ruin with a sieve, stood up and saluted. "How are you getting on, Jenkins?" "Haven't got anything very much yet, sir, bar an ivory cigarette holder. This gentleman," indicating a stout, bald man in spectacles, who was squatting among the damaged coachwork, Is Mr. Tolley from the motorworks? Come with a note from the superintendent, sir. Ah, yes. Can you give any opinion about this, Mr. Tolley? Dr. Maggs, you know. Mr. Lamplough, Lord Peter Wimsey. By the way, Jenkins, Mr. Lamplough has been going into the corpse's dentistry, and he's looking for a lost tooth. You might see if you can find it. Now, Mr. Tolley. Can't see much doubt about how it happened, said Mr. Tolley, picking his teeth thoughtfully. Regular death traps, these little saloons, when anything goes wrong unexpectedly. There's a front tank, you see, and it looks as though there might have been a bit of a leak behind the dash, somewhere. Possibly the seam of the tank had got strained a bit, or the union had come loose. It's loose now, as a matter of fact, but that's not unusual after a fire, rouse case or no rouse case. You can get quite a lot of slow dripping from a damaged tank or pipe, and there seems to have been a coconut mat round the controls which would prevent you from noticing. There'd be a smell, of course, but these little garages do often get to smell of petrol, and he kept several cans of the stuff here. More than the legal amount, but that's not unusual either. Looks to me as though he'd filled up his tank. There are 2 empty tins near the bonnet with the caps loose. Got in, shut the door, started up the car perhaps, and then lit a cigarette. Then, if there were any petrol fumes about from a leak, the whole show would go up in his face. Whoosh! How was the ignition? Off. He may never have switched it on, but it's quite likely he switched it off again when the flames went up. Silly thing to do, but lots of people do it. The proper thing, of course, is to switch off the petrol and leave the engine running so as to empty the carburetor, but you don't always think straight when you're being burnt alive. Or he may have meant to turn off the petrol and been overcome before he could manage it. The tank's over here to the left, you see. On the other hand, said Wimsey, he may have committed suicide and faked the accident. Nasty way of committing suicide. Suppose he'd taken poison first. He'd have had to stay alive long enough to fire the car. That's true. Suppose he'd shot himself. Would the flash from the... No, that's silly. You'd have found the weapon in the case. Or a hypodermic? Same objection. Prussic acid might have done it. I mean, he might just have had time to take a tablet and then fire the car. Prussic acid's pretty quick, but it isn't absolutely instantaneous. I'll have a look for it anyway, said Dr. Maggs. They were interrupted by the constable. Excuse me, sir, but I think we've found the tooth. Mr. Lamplough says this is it. Between his pudgy finger and thumb, he held up a small, bony object, from which a small stalk of metal still protruded. That's a right upper incisor crown, all right, by the look of it, said Mr. Lamplough. I suppose the cement gave way with the heat. Some cements are sensitive to heat, some, on the other hand, to damp. Well, that settles it, doesn't it? Yes. Well, we shall have to break it to the widow. Not that she can be in very much doubt, I imagine. Mrs. Prendergast, a very much made-up lady with a face set in lines of habitual peevishness, received the news with a burst of loud sobs. She informed them, when she was sufficiently recovered, that Arthur had always been careless about petrol, that he smoked too much, that she had often warned him about the danger of small saloons, that she had told him he ought to get a bigger car, that the one he had was not really large enough for her and the whole family, that he would drive at night, though she had always said it was dangerous, and that if he'd listened to her, it would never have happened. Poor Arthur was not a good driver. Only last week, when he was taking us down to Worthing, he drove the car right up on a bank in trying to pass a lorry, and frightened us all dreadfully. Ah, said the inspector, no doubt that's how the tank got strained. Very cautiously, he inquired whether Mr. Prendergast could have had any reason for taking his own life. The widow was indignant. It was true that the practice had been declining of late, but Arthur would never have been so wicked as to do such a thing. Why, only 3 months ago, he had taken out a life insurance for $500, and he'd never have invalidated it by committing suicide within the term stipulated by the policy. Inconsiderate of her as Arthur was, and whatever injuries he had done her as a wife, he wouldn't rob his innocent children. The inspector pricked up his ears at the word injuries. What injuries? Oh, well, of course, she'd known all the time that Arthur was carrying on with that Mrs. Fielding. You couldn't deceive her with all this stuff about teeth needing continual attention. and it was all very well to say that Mrs. Fielding's house was better run than her own. That wasn't surprising. A rich widow with no children and no responsibilities, of course she could afford to have everything nice. You couldn't expect a busy wife to do miracles on such a small housekeeping allowance. If Arthur had wanted things different, he should have been more generous, and it was easy enough for Mrs. Fielding to attract men, dressed up like a fashion plate, and no better than she should be. She'd told Arthur that if it didn't stop, she'd divorce him. And since then, he'd taken to spending all his evenings in town, and what was he doing there? The inspector stemmed the torrent by asking for Mrs. Fielding's address. "I'm sure I don't know," said Mrs. Prendergast. "She did live at number 57, but she went abroad after I made it clear I wasn't going to stand any more of it. It's very nice to be some people, with plenty of money to spend. I've never been abroad since our honeymoon, and that was only to Boulogne." At the end of this conversation, the inspector sought Dr. Maggs and begged him to be thorough in his search for prussic acid. The remaining testimony was that of Gladys, the general servant. She had left Mr. Prendergast's house the day before at 6 o'clock. She was to have taken a week's holiday while the Prendergasts were at Worthing. She had thought that Mr. Prendergast had seemed worried and nervous the last few days, but that had not surprised her, because she knew he disliked staying with his wife's people. She, Gladys, had finished her work and put out a cold supper and then gone home with her employer's permission. He had a patient, a gentleman from Australia, or some such a place, who wanted his teeth attended to in a hurry before going off on his travels again. Mr. Prendergast had explained that he would be working late and would shut up the house himself, and she need not wait. Further inquiries showed that Mr. Prendergast had scarcely touched his supper, being presumably in a hurry to get off. Apparently, then, the patient had been the last person to see Mr. Prendergast alive. The dentist's appointment book was next examined. The patient figured there as Mr. Williams 530, and the address book placed Mr. Williams at a small hotel in Bloomsbury. The manager of the hotel said that Mr. Williams had stayed there for a week. He had given no address except Adelaide, and had mentioned that he was revisiting the old country for the first time after 20 years, and had no friends in London. Unfortunately, he could not be interviewed. At about 10:30 the previous night, a messenger had called, bringing his card, to pay his bill and remove his luggage. No address had been left for forwarding letters. It was not a district messenger, but a man in a slouch hat and heavy dark overcoat. The night porter had not seen his face very clearly, as only one light was on in the hall. He had told them to hurry up, as Mr. Williams wanted to catch the boat train from Waterloo. Inquiry at the booking office showed that a Mr. Williams had actually travelled on that train, being booked to Paris. The ticket had been taken that same night. So Mr. Williams had disappeared into the blue, and even if they could trace him, it seemed unlikely that he could throw much light on Mr. Prendergast's state of mind immediately previous to the disaster. It seemed a little odd at first that Mr. Williams, from Adelaide, staying in Bloomsbury, should have travelled to Wimbledon to get his teeth attended to, but the simple explanation was the likeliest, namely that the friendless Williams had struck up an acquaintance with Prendergast in a cafe or some such place, and that a casual mention of his dental necessities had led to a project of mutual profit and assistance. After which, nothing seemed to be left but for the coroner to bring in a verdict of death by misadventure, and for the widow to send in her claim to the insurance company, when Dr. Maggs upset the whole scheme of things by announcing that he had discovered traces of a large injection of hyoscine in the body, and what about it? The inspector, on hearing this, observed callously that he was not surprised. If ever a man had an excuse for suicide, he thought it was Mrs. Prendergast's husband. He thought that it would be desirable to make a careful search among the scorched laurels surrounding what had been Mr. Prendergast's garage. Lord Peter Wimsey agreed, but committed himself to the prophecy that the syringe would not be found. Lord Peter Wimsey was entirely wrong. The syringe was found next day, in a position suggesting that it had been thrown out of the window of the garage after use. Traces of the poison were discovered to be present in it. "It's a slow-working drug," observed Dr. Maggs. "No doubt he jabbed himself, threw the syringe away, hoping it would never be looked for, and then, before he lost consciousness, climbed into the car and set light to it. A clumsy way of doing it. "A damned ingenious way of doing it," said Whimsy. "I don't believe in that syringe somehow." He rang up his dentist. "Lamplighter, old horse," he said. "I wish you'd do something for me. I wish you'd go over those teeth again. No, not my teeth, Prendergast's." "Oh, blow it," said Mr. Lamplighter uneasily. "No, but I wish you would," said his lordship. The body was still unburied. Mr. Lamplighter, grumbling very much, went down to Wimbledon with Whimsy, and again went through his distasteful task. This time he started on the left side. "Lower 13-year-old molar and second bicuspid filled amalgam. The fire's got at those a bit, but they're all right. First upper bicuspid. Bicuspids are stupid sort of teeth, always the first to go. That filling looks to have been rather carelessly put in, not what I should call good work. It seems to extend over the next tooth. Possibly the fire did that. Left upper canine, cast porcelain filling on anterior face. That's so." "Half a jiff," said Whimsy. "Mag's note says fused porcelain. Is it the same thing?" "No, different process. Well, I suppose it's fused porcelain, difficult to see. I should have said it was cast myself, but that's as may be. Let's verify it in the ledger. I wish Mags had put the dates in. Goodness knows how far I shall have to hunt back, and I don't understand this chap's writing or his dashed abbreviations." "You won't have to go back very far if it's cast. The stuff only came in about 1928 from America. There was quite a rage for it then, but for some reason it didn't take on extraordinarily well over here. But some men use it." "Oh, then it isn't cast," said Whimsy. "There's nothing here about canines back to 28. Let's make sure. 27, 26, 25, 24, 23. Here you are. Canine, something or other." "That's it," said Lamplighter, coming to look over his shoulder. "Fused porcelain. I must be wrong then. Easily see by taking it out. The grain's different, and so is the way it's put in." "How different?" "Well," said Mr. Lamplighter, "one's a cast, you see. And the other's fused. I did grasp that much. Well, go ahead and take it out." "Can't very well. Not here." "Then take it home and do it there. Don't you see, Lamplighter, how important it is? If it is cast porcelain or whatever you call it, it can't have been done in 23. And if it was removed later, then another dentist must have done it. And he may have done other things, and in that case those things ought to be there, and they're not. Don't you see?" "I see you're getting rather agitato," said Mr. Lamplighter. "All I can say is I refuse to have this thing taken along to my surgery. Corpses aren't popular in Harley Street." In the end, the body was removed, by permission, to the dental department of the local hospital. Here Mr. Lamplighter, assisted by the staff dental expert, Dr. Maggs and the police, delicately extracted the filling from the canine. "If that," said he triumphantly, "is not cast porcelain, I will extract all my own teeth without an anaesthetic and swallow them. What do you say, Benton?" The hospital dentist agreed with him. Mr. Lamplighter, who had suddenly developed an eager interest in the problem, nodded and inserted a careful probe between the upper right bicuspids, with their adjacent fillings. "Come and look at this, Benton. Allowing for the action of the fire and all this muck, wouldn't you have said this was a very recent filling? There, at the point of contact. Might have been done yesterday, and here, wait a minute, where's the lower jaw gone to? Get that fitted up. Give me a bit of carbon. Look at the tremendous bite there ought to be here with that big molar coming down onto it. That filling's miles too high for the job. Whimsy, when was this bottom right-hand back molar filled?" 2 years ago, said Whimsy. "That's impossible," said the two dentists together, and Mr. Benton added, "If you clean away the mess, you'll see it's a new filling. Never been bitten on, I should say. Look here, Mr. Lamplighter, there's something odd here." "Odd? I should say there was. I never thought about it when I was checking it up yesterday, but look at this old cavity in the lateral here. Why didn't he have that filled when all this other work was done? Now it's cleaned out, you can see it plainly. Have you got a long probe? It's quite deep and must have given him gyp. I say, Inspector, I want to have some of these fillings out. Do you mind?" "Go ahead," said the inspector. "We've got plenty of witnesses." With Mr. Benton supporting the grisly patient, and Mr. Lamplow manipulating the drill, the filling of one of the molars was speedily drilled out, and Mr. Lamplow said, "Oh, gosh," which, as Lord Peter remarked, just showed you what a dentist meant when he said, "Ah." "Try the bicuspids," suggested Mr. Benton. "Or this 13-year-old, chimed in his colleague. "Hold hard, gentlemen," protested the inspector. "Don't spoil the specimen altogether." Mr. Lamplow drilled away without heeding him. Another filling came out, and Mr. Lamplow said, "Gosh," again. "It's all right," said Wimsey, grinning. "You can get out your warrant, Inspector." "What's that, my lord?" "Murder," said Wimsey. "Why?" said the inspector. "Do these gentlemen mean that Mr. Prendergast got a new dentist who poisoned his teeth for him?" "No," said Mr. Lamplow. "At least, not what you mean by poisoning, but I've never seen such work in my life. Why, in 2 places the man hasn't even troubled to clear out the decay at all. He's just enlarged the cavity and stopped it up again anyhow. Why this chap didn't get thundering abscesses, I don't know." "Perhaps," said Wimsey, "the stoppings were put in too recently. Hello, what now?" "This one's all right. No decay here. Doesn't look as if there ever had been either, but one can't tell about that." "I dare say there never was. Get your warrant out, Inspector." "For the murder of Mr. Prendergast? And against whom?" "No, against Arthur Prendergast for the murder of one Mr. Williams, and incidentally for arson and attempted fraud. And against Mrs. Fielding, too, if you like, for conspiracy, though you mayn't be able to prove that part of it." It turned out, when they found Mr. Prendergast in Rouen, that he had thought out the scheme well in advance. The one thing he had had to wait for had been to find a patient of his own height and build, with a good set of teeth and few home ties. When the unhappy Williams had fallen into his clutches, he had few preparations to make. Mrs. Prendergast had to be packed off to Worthing, a journey she was ready enough to take at any time, and the maid given a holiday. Then the necessary dental accessories had to be prepared and the victim invited out to tea at Wimbledon. Then the murder. A stunning blow from behind, followed by an injection. Then the slow and horrid process of faking the teeth to correspond with Mr. Prendergast's own. Next, the exchange of clothes, and the body carried down and placed in the car. The hypodermic put where it might be overlooked on a casual inspection, and yet might plausibly be found if the presence of the drug should be discovered, ready, in the one case, to support a verdict of accident, and in the second, of suicide. Then the car soaked in petrol, the union loosened, the cans left about. The garage door and window left open, to lend colour to the story and provide a draught, and finally, light set to the car by means of a train of petrol laid through the garage door. Then, flight to the station through the winter darkness, and so by underground to London. The risk of being recognised on the underground was small, in Williams's hat and clothes, and with a scarf wound about the lower part of the face. The next step was to pick up William's luggage and take the boat train to join the wealthy and enamoured Mrs. Fielding in France, after which Williams and Mrs. Williams could have returned to England, or not, as they pleased. "Quite a student of criminology," remarked Wimsey at the conclusion of this little adventure. "He'd studied Rouse and Furnace all right, and profited by their mistakes. Pity he overlooked that matter of the cast porcelain. Makes a quicker job, does it, Lamplow? Well, more haste, less speed. I do wonder, though, at what point of the proceedings Williams actually died." "Shut up," said Mr. Lamplow. "And by the way, I've still got to finish that filling for you."